Hi, everyone. I thank you so much for joining us tonight. I want to introduce my wonderful co-hosts for the evening, Julie Edwards and celebrity life coach Lisa Nkonoki, who has also done us the honor of joining the TST board recently. We're very excited to have her. Later tonight, we'll also have Ray Charles Jr., NAACP Image Award winner and famous award-winning director, will be joining us as well, and we're very excited about that. But first, we're going to do a quick little video about TST and talk to you about the cause tonight and why your contributions are so important. Thank you. Josh? Sorry, 1 second, technical difficulties.
Hi, my name is Becca. I'm the founder and the executive director of The Small Things. We're an organization working in Tanzania with orphaned and vulnerable children and their families. So our primary goal is always keeping children together with their families, and if they have to come into residential care, keeping that as short-term and temporary as possible. But we also work with the community as a whole. We do a lot of different things. We work holistically with children and families to try and figure out the best solution for them. Ideally, that means supporting the families so that the children can stay at home. In some cases, that means coming into care at Happy Family Children's Village, but usually those kids are able to return home. There's very few who end up in long-term care. According to the UN, I believe it's over 50% of Tanzanian families are already caring for at least one child in addition to their own. But the studies show that that often puts a lot of strain on the families who are taking the kids in. The thing that really makes TST different is that we look on an individual basis at what is the closest we can get to a family for this child. Ideally, that means living with their biological family. Sometimes that means support with other relatives. And in rare cases, that means full-time care at Happy Family Children's Village. When I got here 10 years ago, Mama Pendo had already been working and saving children's lives for over 20 years. And I could see from the very first moment that there was so much love.
Ninashukuru TST kwa sababu wamechukua jitihada kubwa sana kuwasaidia wale watoto, ni pamoja na kuwapa mahitaji yao yote ya kimwili, kiakili na kiroho. Na zaidi sana kitu ambacho TST wamefanya kikubwa ambacho kimewasaidia, ile ukaribu, kuwapenda, kuwatia moyo. Kwa hiyo wale watoto wamekuwa wamepona nafsi. Walikuwa wako kwenye hali ambayo sio nzuri. Kwa kweli sasa hivi wako vizuri.
We have a really holistic approach where we recognize that each family and each child needs different things. And so it's never going to be one size fits all. The kids that we're dealing with have been through a lot, and it takes some support to make it possible for them to return home and return to their families. And basically the idea is that for every one of the families that we work with and the children that we work with, there are these moments where something becomes possible for them that wasn't before. And you can't always see the impact from home of what it looks like when somebody who's sort of never gotten a break is told, yeah, we can help you build a business, yeah, we can help you take care of your child. There are kids there who would be dead, many kids there who would be dead if we hadn't been able to say yes. When we have social welfare come with a child who has been abused and neglected and is half or a quarter of the weight that they should be, and we're able to say yes, that's one of those sparks of joy and of hope for the future. I love this work. I feel very grateful to be able to do it. I am very grateful to anybody who is willing to help support us and help create a better world and better opportunities for these kids, because they deserve it.
As you heard earlier, Lisa is a newest member of the Small Things Board, and she has joined us this evening and given us a little bit of her time to tell us a little bit about herself. And I'll do the longer intro for you now, Lisa. So, a coveted entertainment and marketing visionary, strategist, and coach, Lisa is an award-winning entrepreneur whose elite clientele include corporate titans from Fortune 500 powerhouses to finance and celebrities from sports, music, and television, which Lisa brings to their lives a think outside the box, responsive, and solutions oriented style sprinkled with her signature enthusiasm. And I can tell you she has lots of enthusiasm. So we're just going to jump right in, Lisa, and tell us a little bit about why you wanted to support the small things, because I know you have a tie to Tanzania. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, my tie to Tanzania actually comes by way of my father, who actually was a professor at the University of Dar es Salaam. But more importantly, my father was brought by the John F. Kennedy airlift back in the late 50s, early 60s to America, where he was getting his education here in Connecticut and met my mom. So I have that connection because I am actually Tanzanian. And, one of the things I wanted to do in particular was to expand, not only my business, but my philanthropic efforts globally. And in particular, Tanzania made sense. It just so happens that my granddaughter attends Miss Porter's school and Becca is an alumnus of Miss Porter's. So we both happened to hear at different times about Becca and about the small things. And I just said I definitely wanted to get involved. So here we are.
Awesome. Well, we're so grateful to have you as part of our team here at The Small Thing. So thank you. So tell us a little bit about your business, because, life coaches have been one of those things that you hear about, but I think some people wonder, like, what do you really do on a day-to-day basis? Sort of like, what is your role? And so how did you get into that field? I guess it'd be sort of the start, like what drew you to wanting to do that kind of career?
Well, when you work with entertainers, athletes, musicians in the entertainment industry, you become a fixer of everything. So that kind of starts it. I've worked with NBA players, Major League Baseball players, different professional athletes, and Ray Charles Jr. also has been one of my clients, as well as a dear friend. And I just think the idea, you're right. Now everybody calls himself a life coach. Pick up a phone, you're a life coach. I really take it seriously in terms of recommending and working with my clients as if it was my own life when I'm making recommendations. And I usually help them follow through on the path to whatever they're trying to do, whether it's their dreams. My company's called Live Your Dreams, of course. So for me, it's always been about living your dreams, but turning your dreams into reality. I don't like to just say we're dreaming. I like to make it happen. So that's kind of a think out of the box style and making it happen. Whatever your wildest dream is, that's pretty much the challenge that I'd like to take on. So a little bit different than most people, life coaches, though, of course, I do work with people during challenging times, during divorces, deaths, teenagers, which can also be another challenging time. But in particular, it's about meeting people where they're at and kind of helping them figure out, for me, it's figuring out a custom plan for that person. I think it's like the Olympics. We all think about coaches when you go to the Olympics for sports, but people don't think about it for their life or for just challenging other things that you might not be as well versed in. So it doesn't mean that you can't do things on your own. It just gives you another idea of how something can be done. And for me, I happen to do things that are sometimes a little over the top and definitely different than most people would ever prescribe. So I call it a prescription for success.
Okay, so now that you said that, I'm gonna hold you. You don't have to name names because you probably have confidentiality, I know. But what is like one or two of the most out of the box things you've ever done that you were sort of like, wow, I can't believe I did that after you did it?
I have done so many things. One of the things that I did with a former client who was going through a divorce, I was her divorce coach. And then I came up with the idea that I heard her voice one day. So I thought she could create an album, and she wanted to do an album for her neighbors. And I thought that's her voice I could hear was more powerful. So I got her through someone Ray also knew, one of the top vocal coaches in the world, who's currently does The Weeknd, does Mary J. Blige, does everybody. And I brought this particular person to Ron Anderson, the vocal coach to the stars, and we created an album. We went to Prague and recorded in 6 or 7 different languages, and it was up for Grammy consideration the first time out. So, I mean, I've done other things. I've gotten, hasty, like with Ray Jr., when he was as the big producer of the movie Ray that won Academy Awards for Jamie Foxx. I came up with the idea about a book, and that was a little kind of, below the pay grade for what he had already accomplished. But in the end, it ended up being a really great idea. And I think he can tell you more about that when he's on. So I think I've done all kinds of things. I think for myself, um, just creating things like my house is called the Purple Palace. So just whatever it is, I kind of come up with ideas and try and put it to good use. But it's not just about creating things. It's trying to have more than one use for everything. Whether it's your talents, I really am a believer of utilizing your talents, your God-given talents, and then sharing it with others. Because I really feel that success is not totally success unless you have been able to share with other people and pass on some of your wisdom or some of your experiences.
That's a great point. Great point. I mean, because you've been in this a minute, you're not, like you said, you're not a flash in the pan life
No, I'm
coach.
not a spring chicken.
Everybody is. Yeah.
I have like 14 grandchildren, so yeah, and they're all mine. Yeah.
So what did you do before you were a life coach? What was sort of your path? Because
I tell everybody, I started when I was a kid. I actually started at my grandfather's fish market when I was 5. By the
wow,
time I was 10, or 10 or 11, I was producing local television in the NBC market. And that was when I was 11. By 15, I was on Capitol Hill working for a congressman. And by 18, I was working for a TV producer, Norman Lear, because my dream was to go to Hollywood. So by 15, I had already gone to Hollywood, and that was it. I went for a week, and then I was like, that's it. I want to work in Hollywood. So I created a space for myself and was fortunate enough to meet some key people. And Norman helped me to get a prime job in Hollywood, working on many of the major TV shows. And from there, I went on and just was always thinking, always creating, I never thought I was too young to create. And I think my mom, my grandparents laid that path, whether it was working in the garden or cutting my grandmother's hair. They never made me feel like you're too young to do that. Only when I went to apply for a job did somebody say you're too young, but I would always volunteer. And volunteering is a great way, not only to just help yourself, but to learn about other people's experiences, to learn about other people's, trials and tribulations, and also just to get your skill set up. Because sometimes we take for granted what we might not know, and you can just go volunteer and learn something new every day. So that's kind of my path of volunteering actually helped me get to where I'm at today.
and you're still volunteering because the board
Still
is
volunteering. Yes.
so what's next for you? Like, are you getting ready to retire, or do you have more dreams
No,
you want
I
to
have
fulfill?
grandchildren who are actively asking me where else we're traveling to, like to come to Tanzania. That's a big thing. We haven't gone to Africa, to Tanzania, so that's a big thing on my goal list in the next year for sure. And to really, see my grandchildren through college. So probably retirement after 2025, but I probably never retire because I like to be busy. I'm a workaholic. So retirement's kind of not in my blood, but I do want to expand on programs that I have also done that we talked about for Small Things Tanzania around fatherhood. I think that's very important to me, not only here, but worldwide, really making that message of fathers and the importance of fathers and their children's life and their family life is a cornerstone of our families. I think having had a father who left my brother and I when we were very young and abandoned us, I think had a definite impact on me. But I do think there's other things that we can do to continue that legacy in terms of on a positive note and
Mhm.
try to help support other families and other young people.
Yeah, that's definitely, I know in talking to Becca as I've worked with the small things, an issue there because prenatal care is not very good in Tanzania. And so a lot of women die in childbirth, and the fathers are left having to care for these children, which is one of the things that TST can come in and help with. So, I think that that's an awesome goal. Can you talk a bit more about that? Because I think I mean, we talked about that, I know when we talked earlier, but sort of your fatherhood project and what your vision is for that.
I think too often, fathers are expected to financially contribute. And I think I always remind people that when kids graduate from high school, when they go to their prom or to their wedding, they're not interested yes, fathers should contribute, but they're not asking the question, how much did my dad pay? They're asking, is he there? Can he be there? Do I have a relationship with him? Do I have a communication with him? And I think it's so often that so many times that fathers are diminished to the roles of just kind of like standby, and they fit between, graduation and summer. And I kind of feel like we need to really look a little deeper, and also for fathers to be able to be embraced emotionally, to know that even if they don't say it matters in many cases, because sometimes people aren't listening or don't care to listen. I think we should we should always leave a space that always speaks to the importance of fathers. And I always tell people, especially if they're going through divorces or other breakups, that it takes two of you to make a child, and it's not just moms, it's dads, and dads play a very key role in terms of kids' success. So I'm never going to stop, preaching that message and trying to support and uplift fathers any way I can in a positive way.
I think that's great. So I know we're going to bring Ray on in a minute, but is there anything else that I haven't covered that you would just like to talk about or mention?
No, I'm just very excited to be here, to be doing something that was on my bucket list, to do something in Tanzania for Tanzanians, and just get that ball rolling. So I'm just excited to have, maybe the Nkonoki Institute. I talked to Becca. I said, we want to do some life coaching in the Nkonoki Institute and kind of have some things going. I had Malad Katinje here a couple of weeks ago. My sister Emma Nkonoki introduced me. I guess he has Katinje TV over there in Tanzania. So I was pretty excited to kind of have a couple of Tanzanian tie-ins recently. So I'm really excited to promote again the Small Things Tanzania and get that going.
Awesome. Well, I think we're ready to bring Ray on. So if he's ready to come on, and
drum roll.
Yeah, drum roll. Yeah. So thank you. This is Ray Charles Jr. So I'm going to do a little bit, and then I'm going to let you turn it over to you, Lisa, to interview him. So earlier, Becca mentioned Ray Charles Jr. is.
Can't hear you.
Oh, can you not hear us?
Yeah, there's something now. Go ahead.
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. This is his book. If you haven't seen it, You Don't Know Me, Reflections of My Father. This is the book that he won the NAACP Image Award for.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Can't hear me?
No, it's garbly. Sorry.
Ray, can you hear me clearly?
Now I can hear you.
I can hear you clearly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we'll start over. So anyway,
Yes.
This is Ray's book, You Don't Know Me, Reflections of My Father, which is the book that he won the NAACP Image Award for. And then, of course, as Becca also mentioned, he was one of the producers on the film Ray, which Jamie Foxx won the Oscar for. And he has lots of other irons in the fire, I know. And he has worked with Lisa for many years, and they're friends. And Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk to Ray. And we've got about 8 more minutes, and then we're going to segue out into a video, and then we're going to come back to Ray. So if you're watching and have any questions that you'd like to ask, either Lisa or Ray, please type them in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, I'm so excited to have Ray. I haven't seen him. Usually we see each other a few times a year, but because of COVID, this is the first time I've seen him, which he still looks great. But one of the things I want everybody to know about that book is it wasn't just the 2011 NAACP Image Award winner. It won above Nelson Mandela's book, Condoleezza Rice's book, and Jay-Z Dakota's book. So I'm so excited to have my friend and the author of Reflections of My Father, You Don't Know Me. And also, I happen to say that, I kind of gave him the idea, but he was kind of like, no at first. But obviously, one of those think out of the box ideas works. So why don't you tell us about the book and tell us about what you have going on?
Well, thanks for having me. And this is a great cause, Coffee for Kids, and it's necessary, and it's also necessary to keep the awareness going, because it's so easy, because we're not in Africa to forget about the plight, forget about the challenges that a lot of the families and the children still have today, things that we take for granted here, in the United States. And it's just totally vital to keep bringing it to the forefront, especially for those of us who live a fairly good life. I think that's important. You Don't Know Me, Reflections of My Father. You brought that idea up, and it got my creative juices flowing in reference to what I wanted to talk about. And I think what was important about that film, the book, is that it was about love, it was about wealth, it was about family dysfunction, challenges, from substance abuse to just normal day challenges of being Black in America during the 60s when I grew up, and what my father had to go through growing up, and talking about that and talking about overcoming. And I think one of the greatest takeaways from my book is in very simple terms, is that overcoming is vital, number one, because why? You can share that with somebody else. It's also good to talk about your failures, okay, so that people understand that failures don't necessarily mean that you're not successful. It means that it is a learning experience if you use it that way. And so I wanted to talk about my failures because my successes were pretty evident, okay, in reference to Ray and what I had done in the entertainment industry. And the few things that I did do were highly successful. And so I wanted to talk about my failures and some of my failures as a dad, going through substance abuse and making the same mistakes that my father made, and being able to overcome those in a way that's really kind of unbelievable for me to look back on that and to be able to share those things with you. So it's an
So one of the things that, always amazed me, and a lot of people don't know, is the fact of, I always thought you were just as brilliant as your dad in another way. And I think the movie Ray showed that. I think this book showed that. And admiration for you as a dad to two beautiful girls and
yeah,
4 beautiful grandchildren.
grandchildren.
Talk a little bit about, fatherhood and why it's important for people, why it was important for you in terms of being on the scene for your kids and now your grandkids.
Well, I think fatherhood was one of the most important things why I got married so early, so young. I got married at 25 simply because, I wanted to have a family that I can grow up with at age 25. I thought it was a good age, even though I was really young and had not fully decided on what I wanted to do with my life. But I also wanted to raise a family young so that I can grow with them, and be able to share a lot of their successes and their failures, and be able to help them through this life, and to be there for them, unlike what I was experiencing with my dad, and simply because he was always on the road. He was always working. He was a workaholic. And so I wanted to do something a little bit different with my children and experience that and give them a part of me that was very difficult for me to get from my father.
So tell us, what people don't realize is that when you all grew up, your dad had such a pivotal role in civil rights and the Jim Crow laws and things like that. And talk about that and talk about where we are today and how this is kind of what you've seen, because most people don't, you've seen a lot, and that your mom is still with us, because a lot of people don't know that movie was based also around your mom. So tell us a little bit about that. Civil rights, then mom.
It goes not to speak. I mean, in reference to what we were going through, what my father had to go through in the South during Jim Crow, growing up in the South, going to St. Augustine School for the Blind, where they had a line as he walked in where whites were on one side and blacks were on the other side. And he said, well, how in the hell is everybody supposed to figure that out? Because we're blind. And if we're not blind, we're deaf. I mean, so how much sense did that make? And it really showed the stupidity of racism and Jim Crow and segregation at that point in time, which was a life in which he had to live, and the challenges in which he had to go through as an African American man in the Deep South during that period of time. Of, the rise and his part as a growing kid in the South, coming to fame, just the arbitrary things he would go through with law enforcement, or someone basically, there's one story basically where he was with his band members and they were basically taken, okay, after he had come out from working, and they were dropped off in the middle of the road in a pitch black country. Said, okay, you want blacks to sit in the front row or down on the same level as whites. He says, so we want you to think about that, about sending that message. And he was taken out into the country, basically just left in the middle of the road, being blind, in the middle of the night. I thought was one of the most cruelest things that you can do to a human being. And pretty much he burned those lessons into my mind, and in reference to who we are, in reference to this country, as African Americans. And it didn't matter how wealthy he was, he always felt that he was a second-class citizen, and that gave him the drive, that gave him the power to basically be able to go out and overcome, but also to be able to give back in reference to education, to fight all the I would call them drag nets of trying to hold us back as a people. I grew up in the 60s, which was a very important time for my father, basically expressing himself in the only way that he could, because he could not march because he was blind, but he was able to express himself in reference to his movement, in reference to his support to Martin Luther King during that period of time, through money, through not being willing not to make a living, and not being able to perform in areas of the South, simply because black people were treated different. They had to sit in the balcony, could not see him, and they paid the same amount of money. And he just said, that's ridiculous. And if they're not able to sit down here side by side with white patrons, then forget it. I'm not going to perform. And he wasn't banned from Georgia, but he wasn't officially banned, but basically from him walking away from some of those concerts because of his belief in that, he wasn't, promoters would not bring him back. And so there's an ironic story about that, because my first wife, Dewana Chenier, basically, it was her grandfather, Rip Robert of New Orleans, who brought my father back, okay, to perform in the South in New Orleans, okay? He was a manager of Fats Domino at the time. It was so bad at the time, Rip Robert and his wife, Miss Mary, would bring my dad there. They would feed him. They would bring him there. And that's where he started to perform again. And ultimately, who would have thought that I would have married his great granddaughter? I mean, that was an interesting story in itself. For me, and what I write about in my book as a 9-year-old, being in a country where I saw the assassination of John F. Kennedy at 7 years old, where I saw the assassination of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, basically for individuals fighting for our independence, fighting for the right to vote, fighting for our rights as African Americans, okay, to be able to walk side by side, as Americans, was a very scary period of my life, even though we were living a very good life, a very upper middle class life at that point in time, and especially with the neighborhoods in which I grew up. It was still scary. I mean, because I always felt, it was a very scary time for me. I always felt that, my father would get assassinated. I mean, because of his role in the civil rights movement.
Well, you guys had to have a security for you. It was like,
I was driven,
baby, your mom said.
Yeah, I was driven to school every day from that point on, from like 1963 until, geez, I was in the 12th grade. I was driven to school. We had a driver, we had a bodyguard who basically drove us to school, made sure we got there, picked us up from school. And my friends who basically went to school with us, he would watch, they monitored us, our whereabouts most of the time. So didn't have a lot of freedom, to go to do a lot of things, parties and stuff, basically from the, my mother was receiving threats constantly during the 60s. There was so much going on, so much unrest, the watch riots, police brutality repeated again, which stopped from individual being stopped, which resulted in the watch riots. I went through that, where the National Guard basically put us under martial law, okay, in reference to that in the 60s, to what has transpired with George Floyd, all the other individuals who have died needlessly, okay, where there was no accountability. It's about kind of, today was almost a repeat. This was like, without having to be political, with what's going on with the Republicans and what happened in the White House, and at the White House, the insurrection. It just reminds me of what we were going through in the 60s. I was a kid at that time, a teenager, and it's not scary. It's just like, you have to look at that and says, who carries that kind of idiocy for 40 years, 50 years? Why are you so desperate? Why is it that they're fighting so hard to push us back down in an area?
Hundreds of years, really, because it's never really.
Well, I'm just talking in relevance. We all know the idiocy of racism, the idiocy of individuals who've helped build this country, who are our $1 trillion economy in this country. They should be thinking about that. If we withheld that for 7 days in this country, what would happen to the market? What would happen to the United States? But they don't think like that. They want to keep us occupied with murders, and they want to keep us occupied with Voting Rights Act, because why? That's a deflection of what they're really trying to do with voter suppression. And it's just idiocy. It's just old thinking. It's just, my antidote to that is when I run into somebody, and I call it pure ignorance, because I judge individuals by my individual relationship with them, not as a whole. And the guy says, well, I kind of like you, but I don't like this. I said, well, I guarantee you, if you got hurt and you went to the hospital and you got a blood transfusion, I guarantee you wouldn't ask them, was that black blood that you just got a transfusion from? and they look at me with a question mark, like, huh? I said, right. And I said, because if you get sick and you need blood, I guarantee you, is that black blood? Well, I'm not going to take that, but you're going to die. Yeah. Okay, so I put it in a very simple context instead of getting upset and using energy that I don't have space for, because I don't have time. I don't believe anybody in this country has time for the idiocy of individuals who want to carry that kind of around. Human life, we're all human beings, and we should be respected in that manner, period.
So let me just ask you just one last thing, because I know we have to go to a break, right, Becca? We have to go to a break in between.
Well, we have our next video in a few minutes, but this is so interesting. Please keep going.
Real quick, Ray, let's talk about a fun thing, something that people wouldn't know about your life growing up with your dad. Two things. One, I remember your mom told me your dad would get the books from the library in Braille to read to you and your brothers. And then tell us about how your dad was flying planes or driving a Corvette. We need to tell people that.
Well, the unique thing about growing up with my father, he was very wealthy. He was rich at a very young age. And it was very difficult to equate that to other individuals who grew up around me, okay? My father had 2 planes. He had this. He built a 12,000 square foot home in 1965. I didn't know any African Americans living like that. I lived in a neighborhood that was the wealthiest Black neighborhood in the country, okay, which is View Park. And these were my mentors: aerospace engineers, judges, educators, doctors, physicians, and judges. And, I kind of got off of that. Say your question again.
It was about telling about how your dad was driving a Corvette and your
Oh,
planes,
oh God.
and
Okay,
how people
so
wouldn't expect
so
your
my
dad
father
to.
never, yeah, my father never accepted that he was blind, and the reason why is because he was able to see until he was age 6, and so he had a totally different perspective about the world around him because he was able to see that as a child. He he had a reference point to what a car looked like, what flowers looked like, the colors of flowers, what the moon looked like, what the sunshine looked like. And so, you know, he he never walked with a cane. He basically used a number system. Basically, he measured everywhere in which where he totally lived. He measured every room to where he can move freely without anybody guiding him or anything like that, which was an amazing feat because that was attributed to his memory, and I just thought it was amazing. But you know, I have stories about him being blind. I mean, typical example on my on Christmas, my first Christmas, he bought me this candy apple red swing bike, and you know, it was way too large for me. But he bought it, but he built that with his valet, okay, his bodyguard, and you know, for those kids, Santa still exists. But my dad actually bought me a bike, and he put it together and put a ribbon on it, and I thought it was funny because when I got up that morning and I went and looked at the bike, I was excited. I said, but I said, what's wrong with Santa's elves? Because the handlebars are crooked and the seat is sticking straight up. And my mother slapped me upside the head and says, shut up, boy, and there's nothing wrong with the elves. Your father put that bike together. Get out of here, and she told my father to take him out front. And I said, how's he going to do that? He's blind. I'm going to die, I'm going to die. He doesn't know where he's going. She said, you're going to lead your father out the door. He's going to go out to the sidewalk with you. He's going to help you on your bike, and he's going to push you and allow. And lo and behold, he was the only father outside. There we were on my swing, and I would take 3 pedals and I would fall to the ground. If you can picture that, him trying to find me, okay, and trying to pick me up. I thought it was amazing. He built that. I'll never forget that story.
Tell us about the book, how he was reading to you and your brothers, though, because your mom said it wasn't really her that was reading. She was the singer, but he was the reader to you also.
He read constantly in Braille. He always read the Bible. He always had books, and he would read to me. He had the encyclopedia. He would read certain things from the encyclopedia to us. Okay, not Jack and Jill stories, but history. He would talk about music a lot. He would talk about what it meant to be American. I mean, and for him to be, he would talk about where he had come from, being so poor, to where he was. And he always stressed that, and he always stressed the importance of what we needed to do, and how we needed to be committed in reference to what we did. And that never forget that we were African American, and that was something great in America, that in reference to what we had overcome. And he always talked about us overcoming and how strong we were as a race and as a culture, and that we will continue to rise no matter what the stumbling blocks or what kind of obstacles that they will place in our way. And he said excellence will basically prove that, and hard work.
So when we come back, we're going to remember to talk about Patek Philippe, because we had a little thing we did with Patek Philippe, which was fun. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about your dad performing in Africa and all over Europe, because there's people from all over the world that are actually tuning in to us tonight.
Oh, is that right?
We'll do that after we have a little break and hand it over to Becca.
Oh.
Thank you guys so much. I'd love for you to just keep going. It's fascinating stuff. But I do just want to give a little bit of a sneak peek. We were hoping, this year we'd love to have people visiting us in person, but since that's not easy yet, we wanted to give you a little bit of a peek of our new coffee tour that we hold in Tanzania, and also look at if you make a donation to the organization tonight or over the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to get gifts of unroasted or roasted coffee, along with other great little caffeinated goodies. So we're just going to go over to the video right now real quick, and then we're going to show some of those boxes and come back to Ray and Lisa for more. And I know we have a couple of audience questions as well. So we'll make sure to get to those too.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
My name is Ruben Samuel. I am the visitor and volunteer coordinator at the Small Things Tanzania. I studied tourism and wildlife management. I've been working in tourism for more than 7 years. The Small Things, we are working with orphans and the vulnerable children. The proceeds that we get from tours is go direct to TST community. Today you are going to learn about coffee. Coffee is originated from Ethiopia. It was 16th to 17th century. Here in Tanzania, coffee was brought here by Catholic German missionary. It was 1894, and it was in Kilimanjaro region where the trees was planted. We have 2 types of coffee. We have Arabica and Robusta. So this is Arabica coffee. We don't have Robusta here. The Robusta coffee is in Kagera region simply because it's prefer to grow into the lowland elevation, while Arabica prefer to grow in highland elevation. If you want to harvest the coffee is starting from flowers to beans. It has 4 stages. So this is the flower, and here is green coffee, yellow coffee, and red in color, which means that it's ready to harvest. So from flower to red color, it takes 5 to 6 months. So we pick by using hand. We don't have machine to harvesting coffee. And then from there, we do fermentation. We peel out the skin and then we peel out the shell. Then fermentation for 3 days. After there, we dry our coffee. Here I'm going to show you, we have mortar and pestle traditionally. So if you want to make coffee, here, simply you take coffee beans to the mortar and then you grind the coffee by using mortar. Aims to separate shells. So when you separate shells from the coffee, then you're roasting the coffee. After roasting the coffee, we do winnowing, we do filter the coffee, then we got fine powder. After there, what we do is to brew a cup of coffee. Our coffee tend to be pleasant in aroma, rich in acidity and body, sweet taste with balanced flavor due to mineral nutrient from volcanic soils on the slope of Mount Meru. So your coffee is ready here. Enjoy a cup of coffee that you made by using your own hands. Karibu sana. With coffee, there are 3 general levels of roast. A light roast is achieved when the beans are a light brown color. The flavors in a light roast come from the beans rather than the roasting process. They are high in acidity and low in bitterness. Medium roasted beans are a medium brown color. They are a balance of acidity, bitterness, and flavor. Dark roasted beans are a dark brown or black color and have an oily appearance. They are low in acidity, high in bitterness, and get their flavor from the roasting process. To roast beans at home, you need some basic equipment. Any pan, skillet, or wok can be used, but cast iron and stainless steel are best. You will also need a wooden spoon or metal whisk for stirring and a colander for removing chaff. Either a gas or electricity stove can be used. First, preheat your pan to around 480 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, measure out your beans. You need enough that it is easy to stir, but not so many that there is overcrowding. Pour in the beans and immediately start stirring. Keep the beans moving, but don't stir too aggressively. After around 5 minutes, or when the beans turn to a light brown color, you will hear the first crack. This sounds a little like popcorn. Approximately a minute after this, a light roast will be reached. If you want a medium roast, continue cooking until the beans reach a medium brown color without oil on the surface. If you continue cooking past this point, you will reach the second crack. The beans will become very dark in color and make a popping noise for a second time. Oils will become visible along with more smoke. Continue cooking past this point and you have a dark roast. Be careful, as it is very easy to burn the beans. Take your roasted beans off the heat at the desired roast level and place them in a colander or sieve. Outside, toast the beans until cool. Let the wind blow away the chaff. For best result, store the beans for 24 hours before grinding. Grinding the beans is best done with a coffee grinder. Insert the beans and then grind using the handler. A food processor or blender can also be used. Set the power to medium-high and grind for a maximum of 30 seconds. The standard ratio for brewing is 2 tablespoons of coffee to 6 ounces of water. Place the single cup brewer on a cup and measure out the coffee. Pour boiling water over the coffee in a circular motion. Wait until the coffee is dripped through into the cup. Add milk and sugar if desired, and then enjoy.
So incredibly interesting. I just think that's so neat. I can't wait to try that myself. As Becca mentioned earlier, tonight we are having Coffee Talk with Lisa and Ray, and is part of the Small Things Spring Fundraiser Coffee for Kids, A Cup of Hope. So they have the opportunity tonight to donate. If you see the link below me right there, you can go to the smallthings.org/kickoff. That is actually Lisa's personal fundraising page. And on that page, you can choose from a variety of packages once you give a donation. So the minimum donation is $50. If you give a donation, there are various packages you can choose from depending on your donation amount. And with your package, you will also be sent the video you just saw about roasting coffee. So I was going to show you really quickly some of the packages. We have spa packages, Mother's Day packages, coffee lover packages. So they will come to you very nicely packed. I'm not going to open this because I don't want to mess it up, but very nicely boxed with tissue paper and all the things inside. Of course, you will get your choice of coffee. It's African coffee, so you can get roasted or unroasted beans. So if you want to be adventurous and roast your own beans at home, you have that option. Most of the packages also include the grinder and the pour-over cup, which you saw in the video. So again, if you want to be ambitious and grind and roast your own coffee at home, you'll have the tools to do that. The spa package and the Mother's Day package in particular, and it lists all things that are in the packages on the site, include some yummy goodies. Love this. This is actually coffee scrub that's made from coffee for your body. I know that getting a little bit glare there. Coffee candles, some wonderful coffee soap, and these like really cool coffee bath bombs. And then the other thing that you get, there's a chocolate lovers package. So chocolate and coffee, I love chocolate and coffee together, but we have these awesome chocolate bars that you can get. You'll get a variety of those. I think those are also in several of the packages. But my favorite thing that is in many of the packages is jewelry. You can see my earrings I have on and my bracelets. These are actually made at the Small Things. This is part of their vocational program where they teach teens and young adults to make jewelry, and they sell that jewelry, and that's part of their training. So lovely brass pieces and braided pieces, some beautiful beaded pieces. See the twisted bracelets, so nice. So you'll also get to choose from that. So just some really lovely things, and hope that you'll go over there and see what we have to offer, make a donation, and then pick your gift. And it's a great cause, as you can see, and hope that you'll participate tonight or sometime over the next month. It'll be going on through the month of May, so you'll have plenty of opportunity. And I think now we're going to segment back to Lisa and Ray and have them finish up their discussion. And toward the end of that, we have a few questions that have come in. So I think I'm going to pop back on and ask those questions of Ray. And so we're going to turn back over to Lisa.
You there, Ray? Okay.
Here.
So
Here.
one of the things I wanted to definitely talk about, I forgot. Maybe I should ask you what's one of the favorite things we've done together, but I would say, because I want to talk about your mom. Probably most memorable moment was going to the White House, and everybody can tune into my website where I think there's a behind the scenes of us getting ready to go to a concert that the Obamas, President and Mrs. Obama hosted. Was their last concert on PBS. So I want you to talk a little bit about what that was like, going to the Smithsonian to see your dad's stuff, and then going to the White House, and what it was like for your mom. Because I know all I remember, she said she was going to throw up because she couldn't believe she was going to the White House. So tell us a little bit about that.
Being the backbone of a lot of getting my father to the point to where he could be successful and sustain that success, she was a major part in it. Not just raising his children, but being a very strong voice to him, a voice of reason, a voice of support when he needed that support, during his own vulnerable times in his life. And for her to be able to go and to be a part of a White House celebration with Michelle and Barack Obama was simply awesome for her. And in her lifetime, from where she came from picking cotton, as a child, and to be able to go to the White House was an amazing feat. And I wanted it so much for her, more so than myself. But to be able to not only go to the White House, but to meet the first and only African-American president, which no one being brought up during that period of time would ever thought that they would see a Black president in this country. And it was just an amazing feat, even though with all the preparation, we end up in the storm. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's.
We spent all day getting ready, and then we get out of the limousine, and we are drenched by a flash thunderstorm.
Yeah. Yep,
so
there
was a lot of drama to that. But to meet the president, to be able to celebrate that with President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, who were so gracious, and
was all those artists that were playing your dad's music. Tell us about some of the artists that were playing, and they played and Demi Lovato singing "You Don't Know Me." That was one of the things.
Demi Lovato was so great, and I'm so happy she was able to overcome some of her some of the things that were plaguing her in her personal life. Was truly happy because she's a very nice person. She can truly sing, and it's really nice to come out in reference to my book to be able to talk about overcoming and talking about issues that most individuals look at us and say, you can't have those kind of problems. Well, we have those kind of problems and more, and so it's vital to be able to write your stories for people to really understand that we're human beings, and that we're all God's children. And I tried to make that as plain and simple in my book, talking about human experiences, failure, dysfunction. When I lived a life that was second to none. I mean, I never wanted for anything. I never wanted for clothes. I never missed a meal. I don't know what that's like. I can't even fathom what that's like, to be able to do that, and to be able to be on here today to help children who do have those struggles. They will never be able to experience what I was able to experience as a child, but in hopes that you can always shine a light to where someone else who does have the financial capacity to be able to help children in this is a steady effort that we have to continue, because these stories are very prevalent, they're real, and we have to just basically keep them in the forefront. And I'm glad Lisa asked me to participate on this level, because it is something
So let's talk a little bit about that, because people always ask, as a life coach, you know, what do I do? How do I do it? And I think one of the things that at that time you had hired me to be your publicist, and we were working on projects, but I talked to you because I think this is exactly what people need to see. I knew you as my friend, and I saw you were having different challenges, but I also knew your brilliance. And I thought that even though you had achieved the success with the movie Ray, you were still in mourning because it was after you had lost your father.
Yeah.
And I think so many of these young people in Tanzania and other places, even just with what we're going through with COVID and everything, have lost someone very special to them, very intricate. And tell us, even though you had some resistance, kind of let people know what you were feeling like, because it was a terrible time for you in many respects, but you still allowed either for me to push you or but to shift. I think just talk
Well, you
about
had to
what
push.
that is to shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
To
I mean,
shift yourself, because I think that's what people need to kind of hear. How do you get, when you don't know if something's going to work, but you get yourself to shift, and you share what you're holding, what might be holding you back?
I mean, during that period of time, you came in and offered help simply because it didn't matter how I was living. I was living a very comfortable life. I mean, you know, um, but I was just kind of in a shell. I was just shell shocked from the whole thing. Shell shocked just from not only what I went through, I took myself through personally, because I couldn't deal with the death of my father. And on life terms, I started having issues with drugs, and that just kind of numbed me out, okay, from feeling everything that I was feeling when I found out my father was dying. What was interesting is that I was in Russia at the time, and I had left the set of Ray to go make another movie about Alexander Pushkin, who was also an Ethiopian prince. It's a great story about whose great grandfather basically became, the godson of Peter the Great, Abraham Hannibal Petrovich. And I was in Russia at the time making that film while Ray was being finished. And I was carrying a lot of emotions then, because the movie just brought back so many painful experiences. From me, saving my father's life at one point when I was 7 years old, to all the other things that we had to go through, okay, and suffering, and then learning later, why I was feeling the way I was, from the PTSD that I experienced from the trauma of all that, which is probably some of the children that are in this orphanage are experiencing great PTSD of just from the shock of losing somebody. It's not just that you lose somebody, it is the shock of it. It is the peril of it, and not having the resources or the people around you to help pick you up, which makes these stories so touching and so heartbreaking. And I have to tell you, with the support system around me, it was very difficult to be able to fathom what I went through. I mean, with drugs, and then to be able to come out of that, to be able to have somebody come and say, look, you need to get out of this funk. You have so much to give. Focus on writing about that in a book. And that's how I was able to come up out of the funk. Even though I didn't feel depressed, I was still depressed. My father passing, it was still 3 or 4 years passing. And by writing that book, it gave me freedom, because I was able to talk about my own failures. I was able to talk about my own dysfunction, how I got through it, and how I look forward to spending that time with my first grandchild, who's now 17, and that I always wanted to walk and talk with her and to be able to talk to her about that. And I've been able to do that, and it was a blessing, and it brought a lot of tears to my eyes, because she was the last thing I mentioned in that book about what I wanted for her, and I never wanted her to go through what her parents had, her mother had to go through with me. And
The other thing we talked about that I thought that was very critical, and people don't always realize it, I kind of maybe said it to folks around this, is that you are the son of, but you are so much more than that. And sometimes having to live in the shadow of that, when, especially when you have a famous parent that everybody thinks they know. I think one of the things we talked about clearly was I wanted you to envision and share with the world things that nobody knew, because everybody seemed to think they knew your dad better than you. And I think that was a very big piece of people assuming they know who you are, who your dad is. And I think that's one thing we talked about. And I think that could be something helpful to young people to talk about what they know about their parents, because it might be there. Some of them are in orphanages because their parents might have passed, but some might have been abusive or other things. So I think, again, it's what you think of your own parents. So kind of talk about what that was like and how freeing that was to be able to share what you knew to be the truth.
Well, I shared as much of the truth as I could, because my mother was saying, okay, that's not the public's business. Okay. That's our life, and it's going to remain behind closed doors. She said, but everything else, you can talk about that, because it's going to help someone else really get a good picture about how you look up to individuals. Number one, just, you can never, ever forget is that all we are human beings. Some of us may have a few more units than others. Okay. And I call money units. Okay. Because, and some of us may just have been fortunate, and being fortunate has a lot to do with that. But what I would like to say to those individuals and those children who are going through a lot is that they need to understand that there are individuals in the world that do care about them, that do care about what happens to them, and who pray. And the most important thing, who pray for them to be able to grow, for them to be able to experience this life in a better manner than what they're going through. And prayer is important, along with your money. You can give money and walk away and just say, okay, I gave money, but your prayers and whatever you can do, and whether that's just speaking to somebody that may lighten up their day, I'm always willing to do that, because because most people are going to say, well, he wants to talk to me. I'm just a human being. I am more than the son to Ray Charles, to my grandchildren and to my children. I'm their father and their grandfather, and I have my own legacy to leave to them, and it's going to be totally different than what Ray Charles left here, because they will notice my legacy to them. They don't know much about their great grandfather, and so it's vital for me to be able to do things that they will be able to carry on. They'll be able to understand, and my oldest granddaughter is very, very carries a lot of empathy. I believe that ultimately she will go into filmmaking and social entrepreneurship, because she's very socially conscious, very sensitive to that fact. And so,
well, speaking of oldest granddaughters, we both were fortunate. Both of our granddaughters, Becca, you should know this, both went to the Miss Porter summer camp before Michaela became a student there. And then after then, we took them to Patek Philippe in New York to an exhibition. Yeah. And from that, we were able, I think one of the things, again, that I knew, someone called me about, a collector said, does Ray Charles know about his dad's Patek Philippe watch that was created? There was a gentleman who used to be the CEO who created this watch. So I said, well, he might not know where the watch is, but I bet you he knows about it. So tell us a little bit about that Braille collectible Patek Philippe, and then what we had Patek Philippe do in terms of an idea for a public service announcement, more or less commercial, about your dad. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was infatuated with this watch. I was a child. I was between 5 and 8 years old, and I remember when Norman Grant, who was a promoter in Europe, who gave that to my father as a present. It was a one-of-a-kind Patek Philippe, which it was designed where it had a cover where, if you can see my watch, let me see if you can see my watch, where on the top of the watch, you basically can touch it. The watch would open, everything inside of the watch basically was done in diamonds, but it was in Braille. And so my father spent a lot of time playing with the watch because he liked gadgets, and he would play with the watch, put it to his ear, and listen to the movement of the watch. And it was very special because he would tap it, it would open, and then he would feel the Braille, okay, and he would know what time it was. And I do have that watch, and I couldn't bring the watch out because my mother made me promise that while she was alive that I would never put that watch on display or put it up for auction. So,
and then he also made one for your mom too, right?
Yeah, he had another specially Patek Philippe made for my mother, which also flipped open as well. So, they have a great story with Patek Philippe, but now everybody wears Patek Philippe, so I have to go to.
So, all right, well, tell us a little bit about your dad's travels to Africa. I think you said he was in South Africa and Europe. Just give us, as a child who knew the world, this is not new to you in terms of knowing the world. Well, tell us a little bit about where your dad performed in his.
Well, my dad performed in South Africa, in Cape Town, and I'll never forget that because when he asked me, he said, "You want to go?" And I said, "Nope," because I said, "I'm not going to declare myself an honorary white person, okay, to get into the country. I'm not doing it." And I refused to do that.
That was at the time of apartheid.
During that time of apartheid, it was apartheid at that time, and an African American coming from anywhere who entered South Africa had to register themselves with the country, with the ministry, with the government.
Ministry of Tourism or something to that effect.
You had to register as an honorary white person. You denounced your color and your culture to be able to enter into South Africa. And I told him I'm not doing it. And so therefore my younger brother went on that trip, and he told me what it was about. And, walking around, they get off the plane and all the soldiers and the police have, automatic weapons and stuff like that. There's a curfew. We couldn't be on the streets at a certain time. And I asked my father, I said, what is the point? Do you know what they're doing over? Do you know what they're doing? I said, I refuse to do that to myself. And he said, I'm going to go here as a symbol of what we are. Okay. And the hope, and try to provide some kind of hope here, because just by not going and allowing it to see, I want to see it for myself. I want to experience it for myself. And that was his reason for going. And we got a lot of flack. He got a lot of flack for that. A lot of protests against my father going and declaring himself an honorary white person. And we experienced a lot of backlash because of that. But I wasn't doing it no more than I can live in the South. Okay. I wasn't going to I don't tolerate ignorance. I don't tolerate little minds. I don't tolerate people that sit in corners and they hate and they have no idea why they hate. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is that there's so many good people in the world who are white, black, or indifferent. And they don't know better. And you have these people with their Bengalis and their lies. And so, but apartheid was something so brutal. It was so brutal. And when they're talking about what they're talking about George Floyd today, people literally were just being taken from their homes and murdered. Okay? I couldn't do something like that. Mm-hmm. And so people were being murdered at random. I mean, the secret police were killing people, and we know that. We know the stories, and I don't have to rehash the stories. But the plight of that is, it's awesome. The plight of the African people is still an issue. Right. It is still an issue, and so there are a lot of things in works that we're trying to do, and COVID kind of got in the way of what I was trying to do with Mo, but it's still to come, and hopefully we can take some of those proceeds and be able to send them back into communities and villages, that need it.
All right, we had a question from the audience. I'm sorry.
I saw that.
One of, and I'm sorry I can't see the name again, but I know the question, I think, was, was it your favorite memory of your dad? I'm pretty sure that's what it said. what your favorite memory of your dad is.
Okay, that's Sean. And so my favorite memory was my father had just come home. This is right after the watch riot. It was Christmas. And so I'm 11 years old, and I wake up really early because he had not been there yet. You know, he did not move in that house with us. Okay. And he had just got home maybe a couple of weeks before. And so it's about 5 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. And I get up and I want to go look at the Christmas tree and look at the toys. And so I creep down and I see my father there. He's sitting there and he's singing Christmas carols to himself. And I sit on the stairs and I'm just watching him for about an hour. And then, you know, he's under the tree, he's feeling the presence, and, you know, he's just feeling the home because he had not lived there yet. And he had just gotten there. And I thought it was very interesting for him. And I just watched him as a child wants to watch his father. He goes to the piano where my brothers and I, we had placed cookies and milk for Santa, okay? And next thing I know, my father goes over, he's feeling around, he feels the cookies, and he starts eating the cookies and drinking the milk. and I yell out, I said, "Hey, that's for Santa. What are you doing?" And my father threw the glass, he threw the plate, because I startled him. I said, "That's for Santa." I said, "Where's Santa?" And he said, "He ain't coming." He's not coming. He ain't coming. You know, you're not.
Oh my God. All right. So that's
I'll
a
never
good
forget.
one.
I'll never
Sean,
forget
you
this.
got that answer, right, Sean? That's something that nobody else heard. You heard it here first. So thank you. I don't know, Becca, do you have any, or Julie, you have any other questions? I know you said you had some other questions from the audience. I want to make sure we get those in.
Hi. Cannot hear you.
Can't hear you, Julie.
Can't hear you, Julie.
And about your dad, that story, so I had muted myself, so I apologize. Yeah, so yeah, I have a question from Josh. He says, "What did you learn from your dad about being a dad?"
I learned, because he wasn't able to, because he didn't have a father that was around. I learned to be present, and I learned to be a part of their lives and be an adamant. And so that meant changing diapers, doing this, because my father really couldn't do all that. Even though he did change my diapers, I can't imagine what that looked like. I can't imagine what my diapers look like then, okay? But, you know, I just wanted to be present. I wanted to be emotionally present. I wanted to, you know, I wanted to put them to bed at night. I wanted to pick them up. I wanted to read to them, but I wanted them to be with me wherever I went. And I was able to do that. And that's what persevered when I started having issues with them. And that's what they remember. And even though their mother did a great job raising them, you know, when I was having issues, they remember that. I was very attentive. I was really overprotective of them. And I wanted them to basically be the best that they can be. And that's what they've kind of done.
And they are.
That's what they turned out to be. They've given me four beautiful grandchildren. Yes.
And beautiful daughters.
I think that's so important, and it's something, you know, all over the world we have these parents and these family members who just love these kids and want the best for them, you know, as we all do. So I just want to thank you so much, Ray and Lisa, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Julie, for your help. I want to ask people again, please do go to thesmallthings.org /kickoff.
Yeah.
It's been a rough year with coronavirus and everything else. You know, it has been a struggle, and every dollar goes so far here.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we're gonna say a little goodbye from the kids as well.
Okay.
Good night.
Tell them God bless and blessings to everyone.
Thank you so much, Ray. We will.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Asante.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Asante.
Thank you. Anyway, thank you.
Sekule ku sekule ku sekule ku ye ye ye. Kazabu